Let's see the IBM single sign-on service for Bluemix in action. Our first scenario is a simple one, a user signing in through a social media website. Let's open up a new IE tab and navigate to an application. This is the same simple application that you will build if you proceed on to the lab section. We'll click on the login button, and then the SSO service will prompt with identity sources that it knows. It only knows one for this SSO service, Facebook. So we'll select this to log in. Now we see the external website, Facebook, providing a login for the user. User enters their credentials and then clicks on the login button. And then control returns back to the application, and the application displays the unique ID that was sent from the identity provider back through the SSO service. The second demonstration will show adding a second identity source to the single sign-on service, and then taking this service and binding it to a second application. After we've bound it to the second application, we'll go back to the first application and make sure that it knows about the new single sign-on service identity source. And then lastly, we'll start the second application and do another demo. We'll start by opening up the single sign-on service control panel so that we can add the new identity source. The configuration panel for the single sign-on service is organized into tabs. We're in the Setup tab now, and the Setup tab controls the settings of identity sources. There's a second tab that you see now called Design, and that's where templates that are used by the single sign-on service for prompting the user can be updated. We'll pick a new identity source, the cloud directory, and from here you see we have both Search and Add User buttons for the directory. We'll click on the Add User button and now enter in the specifics for a demonstration test user, providing a username, a password, a given name, a surname, and an email address. Once all of this is entered, we'll click on the Save button to add the user to the directory. Immediately after adding the user, it's not shown. You can either reveal it by clicking on the search button or saving the service like we have here with the current configuration and then going back into the service. Now with the service saved and reopened, we have another settings option where we can go in and take a look at a couple of configuration settings for this identity source. An important one is the password policy. Since this is a directory in the cloud, you can actually select from a few different password policies to apply to users as they are in the directory. We'll keep the default of medium strength for passwords. Now that the identity source has been configured and one user has been added, we can go back and add this single sign-on service to the second application. We'll go back to the Bluemix dashboard and then click on the application to open up the overview panel. We're going to select the Bind to Service or API button, and then when prompted, we'll pick the single sign-on service that we have been editing and then click on Add. In a moment, the now bound service will show in the application overview. We're going to click on it to open up the control panel again for single sign-on service. And now we are opening it in the context of this application, which adds an additional tab to the display. On the upper right, now you see a tab called Integrate. And this tab is where we'll be configuring the attributes of how the single sign-on service works with this application instance. We're going to provide a callback URL for the single sign-on service to invoke when it completes an authentication of a user. And we can also provide a name when we prompt a user for the sharing of their personal information from the external authentication service. We're changing the name from the default here so that it will be easier for us to recognize later on in the demonstration. Also in the Integrate tab, there's the option of selecting different identity sources to be made available to this application. We'll select both of these services for use. If you're using Node.js, there's a link on this part of the Integrate tab where you can download a copy of the module for your Node.js application. So now we have saved the settings here in the Integrate tab, and we are ready to go back to the Bluemix dashboard and continue configuring these applications for our demo. Let's continue by going to the first application, and now we'll open the single sign-on service in that application context. Here for this application, when we go into the Integrate tab, we'll see that there is no cloud directory selected yet. Let's select this and save. You probably remember from the first demo that the single sign-on service displayed only a single identity source. Now, when this application calls a single sign-on service, it will display both Facebook and the cloud directory identity sources. To continue on with our demonstration, let's go back to application number 2, and we'll go over to the overview panel and click on the Start button. And now this application will start, and we can do another more complicated scenario with both applications running in Bluemix. This next demonstration shows one of the important benefits of the single sign-on service. We have two applications which are configured in Bluemix that we saw from the previous part of the demo. We're going to open web browser tabs to both of these applications. And then we're going to start by proceeding through the login process using our new cloud directory user in the first application. Well, now in the first application, I see two choices. We'll select the cloud directory. This time, instead of an external website, the single sign-on service does provide a place for the users to enter credentials, which are then used to verify against the cloud directory. After logging in, the application displays a unique ID that's been returned from the cloud directory. Now the web browser user will go to application number 2. This application is using the same single sign-on service in Bluemix as application number 1. After clicking on Login, the user is prompted to authorize the sharing of their personal information to the second application. Now the user will select Allow and Remember. The web browser will store this, and a customized message is sent from application number 2, but it still has the same unique user ID as we saw in application 1. The last demonstration for IBM Single Sign-On Service for Bluemix will focus on the scenario where a user is already signed in through a web browser to an identity provider like a social media website or an enterprise application. We'll go back to application number 1, and then we'll click on the Login panel. A single sign-on service will display a list of possible identity sources. Here we can see the user is already signed in to Facebook. When the user selects the single sign-on identity source of Facebook, the user is immediately authenticated through the existing web session with the identity provider, and the application displays the unique ID that's returned back from the single sign-on service.